Fantastic. Good to see you all. Thanks for coming. For those of you who don't know me, my name's John Hamer. I'm a historian, and I've been a geopolitical researcher, author, and public speaker for the last 26 years on various topics, mainly questioning history and science. I'm not a scientist, but people say to me, I wrote a book called The Falsification of Science, which some of you may have seen out there. But people said to me, John, you're not a scientist. How can you write about the falsification of science? What do you know? And my answer to that is, well, I'm not a weatherman either, but I only need to look out the window to see whether it's raining or not. So it sounds glib, but it's true. You don't need to be a scientist to know that certain elements of science are, shall we say, inaccurate. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about the lost technology of the 20th century. Some people may call it suppressed technology, but lost sounds a little bit more gentle and refined. And following on from that, I'm going to talk a little bit about electric cars, which are not, as you may soon find out, as green as they tell us. So we'll look a little bit at that. But before I get into the presentation proper, I just want to run through a little bit of a preamble for those of you who are not aware of my work and not aware who I am and what I talk about. So basically, for those of you who like Venn diagrams, this is just about where we are as a society right now. About there somewhere. Yeah, so that's where we are in this upside down, back to front, inside out world of ours. Okay, but of course, what do I know? I'm just a conspiracy theorist. I wish I had a pound for every time someone had called me that. But I'm not really a conspiracy theorist, I'm a conspiracy factist, okay? I don't deal in theories, I only deal in hard, concrete facts. So everything that you hear tonight has been backed up by my many years of research. But not only am I a conspiracy theorist, I've also been accused of being a racist, misogynistic, homophobic, Holocaust-denying, anti-Semitic, COVID-denying, anti-vaxxer, and a climate change-denying, anti-science, flat earth loony, and extreme right-wing terrorist. I thank you. All for simply telling the truth, based on my decades of research. And isn't it a strange coincidence that all those epithets just happen to support the ongoing agenda, the prevailing agenda? I simply tell the truth as I see it. I have no agenda myself. I have no axe to grind. I deal in facts, that's all. And I've got nothing against any of those groups or organisations that those terms are meant to protect, okay? But I do have a huge problem with the intent behind that agenda, okay? But that's another story for another time. So we're not going to go into that. But I want to talk a little bit about conspiracy theories just very briefly because, you know, it's a term that we hear bandied about in the press all the time. He's a conspiracy theorist, she's a conspiracy theorist. What is the definition of a conspiracy theory? Well, it was actually coined by the CIA in the aftermath of the JFK assassination, and it was used to discredit anyone who questioned the Warren Report, which was the investigation into Kennedy's murder. And now it's used prolifically to discredit anyone who exposes the lies that appear in the mainstream by the establishment. So yeah, I've got a few definitions here. It's a term used by the mainstream media to slander anyone who questions their monopoly on the truth. It's also someone who questions the statements of known liars. Think about that. You know, if we researchers, we geopolitical researchers, how dare you, if we question anything that the government or the media tells us, we're immediately labelled by this epithet, conspiracy theorists. Conspiracy theorists, yep. So, yeah, People tell us that conspiracy theorists think everything's a cover-up. Well, that's not true at all. We question everything, we do our research, and we come to conclusions that scare people. And a glib definition could be a person that doesn't watch as much TV as you do. Okay. But the thing is, you see, most people don't really want the truth. They just want constant reassurance that what they believe is the truth. And I think that's a very true statement. Okay. So, yeah, the human brain is a very sophisticated, complex organ. It works day and night, 24/7, from the moment you're born until you turn on the news. So, don't say I didn't warn you about what's coming, but actually tonight's fare is pretty mild stuff compared to many of my talks. But I do pull absolutely no punches whatsoever. So, just to warn you. And yeah, as I say, just to reiterate that, I'm not the kind of person who comes here just to say what you like and what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you raw truth, whether you like it or not. So, there you go. The best mind-altering drug is truth. Absolutely. Now, where did I get my research from? Where do I do my research? Obviously, other authors on related topics, standing on the shoulders of giants, if you will. Various other resources, such as archives, libraries, the ubiquitous internet, and my book collection, some of which contains books which are very, very old. And I found that the older the book, the more likely it is to tell the truth. Why is that, John, I hear you ask? Well, funny you should ask that. It is because as the agenda that we're living under has progressed, it's got more and more refined and censorship has taken over. So the older books are the ones that contain the most truth. But not only did I get it from my own book collection, I also used this book as well, which I found quite useful. Okay, so that's the preamble over. Let's be serious for a moment. Come on, stop laughing now. Good question. Why would apparently beneficial technologies be lost or suppressed? Well, let's have a look, shall we? Let's have a look at some examples. Okay, anyone know who this guy is? Yeah. Of course, most people do, I guess. It's Mr. Tesla. Amazing guy. He invented something a long time ago called the violet ray machine. And I believe we've got an example of it here, have we, somewhere? Yes, hello, over there. Yeah. Okay, now, this machine, believe it or not, let that sink in for a minute. This is not fantasy, this is real. Of course, none of that's mentioned in that bastion of truth, Wikipedia. And why would that be? Because they don't want us to know, of course. Simple reason. That is an actual original one. It was invented by Tesla in the 1920s, I think it was, and it was known as the violet wand. And it produced 50,000 volts of plasma that actually warmed the skin on contact. And due to its exotic warming nature, they were marketed as medical healing devices. But how these work and what is inside of them is just as amazing as their claims, to be honest. And I'm going to play you a short video here, if I can get this to work. This is what I've been messing about up here all the time. I'm in terrible trouble trying to get the internet to work. Okay. Moving on. Oh, it's working now. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to play a short video here.
It's the year 1920. You're in your Ford Model T listening to the first commercial radio station and headed home from an epic jazz hall. You had as much fun as this guy. But all that jazzery, that's left your knees kind of hurting. Luckily, you've got just the solution. Now, It's called the Violet Wand. This thing cures everything from baldness to asthma. All you do is you turn it on, bring it towards your knee, give it a little rub, and ow! What the? Nope, hard pass. Hey, it's Jay. This is Plasma Channel, and this is the real deal. 50,000 volts in the palm of your hand that we used to believe had magical healing properties. So grab your Violet Wand because we're going to take a look at what's inside these things, how the heck they work, and how they help define the Roaring 20s. What's so cool about these devices is they represent a time when electricity was exciting and new. People hadn't really heard of something like this before, and high voltage was just a curiosity. They came with various glass electrodes of different shapes, all for different purposes, and they lit up with brightly colored plasmas. Just look at this one in particular. They were and still are quite the spectacle. For these reasons, it was easily marketed as the end-all cure for dozens of illnesses. Curing asthma and baldness was honestly just the beginning. It treated anemia, bronchitis, bruises, deafness, toothaches, foot sprains, the list goes on. In reality, it did serve some medical purposes, but in general was considered a medical quack device from the 1920s. Now, it also is interchangeable with the violet ray, which, guess what, that was invented by Nikola Tesla himself. So that kind of makes this sort of like the spoiled grandchild of the Tesla coil, you know? Now I have two violet wands here, an original from 1920, which you've already seen, and a modern one from 1990. Those of you with a keen eye might notice they haven't changed much. The older violet wand was donated by my father, and it came in this really sick antique case, complete with analog on-off switches and an adjustable power knob in the middle, and there was a lot of brass throughout this which helped to date the thing. It also came with a spare violet wand that was more incorporated with the kit, and the lid can hold about a dozen electrodes. Couple that with the fact that this is made in USA in Detroit back in 1920, and it's from Renew Life, this is a legit antique. As for the newer one, it was actually donated by a viewer, so Ed, I hope you're watching, thank you very much. But let's think about what these things are. They take a wall voltage and boost it up to 30, 40, 50,000 volts, all in a handheld package. That's pretty advanced for the 1920s. So how exactly is this supposed to be used? Well, first you select the electrode for your specific ailment. There were some for general application, others for combing through the hair, and there were some for healing your butt. After inserting the electrode into the wand, you would apply the electricity directly to the affected area of your body. I actually have a chronic wrist issue, so, ow, not again. I should note that the majority of the time, these are designed to be used with the glass electrodes because the glass itself actually limits the power of the sparks. Otherwise, the sparks these things make. You have to admit, though, these things are pretty biblical. But just wait till you see the inside of this 100-year-old antique. I mean, it essentially is a time capsule that speaks volumes for the production standards and production qualities from 100 years ago. So let's take a look inside an original violet wand. The casing is old Bakelite plastic, and the construction, I mean, it's incredible. These windings held together with thread and paper, a coil of wire insulated with nothing but cloth, and this is beeswax, likely used to insulate from high voltages. More wax is soaked into these windings, the thread, the layers of paper, and these wires are also insulated with that wax-soaked cloth as well. It comes complete with the classic mechanical power switch. As for how they worked, it's actually really cool. They were mechanically driven transformers, meaning they relied on these little moving parts called relays. 110 volts comes in and opens up the relay, which charges this capacitor. But the relay, it's designed to automatically close. This dumps all the energy from the capacitor into this primary coil. Energy is then radiated underneath into the secondary coil, which has hundreds of times more turns. That turns the 110 volts into nearly 50,000. Wicked cool. And this cycle repeats dozens of times a second. Absolute time capsule. So that's a look inside of a 100-year-old medical antique that helped define the 1920s. As for the modern one, I mean, it's just a flat-up awesome power source to mess around with. It makes 1-inch arcs onto pretty much anything I want. But do these work? Do they treat the asthma, the bronchitis, the other serious ailments they were claimed to treat back in the 20s? Well, since the high voltage is capacitively coupled through the glass, it can significantly warm your skin, causing vasodilation and increased blood flow. That can be healthy. However, there's limited evidence that these help with the more serious of ailments. Now, due to the nice, gentle, warming action of violet wands, they tend to be found in at gun stores. You didn't see that one coming. So if you've ever seen one of these at an antique shop, just remember how these represent an era. It was the grandchild of the Tesla coil put to everyday use. I had a lot of fun shooting this, so let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, special thanks to Ed, my father, and to all the Patreons who helped to support my work. Plasma Channel out. Thanks for stopping by, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to Plasma Channel. I post to other social media, and feel free to check out our...
Okay, that was just a brief snapshot of what it's all about. In a similar vein, does anyone know who this guy is? Correct. It is Dr. Royal Raymond Rife, and he invented something very similar. Okay, now, again, he claimed that it cured all known diseases, including cancer, and there was a lot of evidence to suggest that it was true. But unfortunately, Big Pharma, the pharmaceutical giants, destroyed all his lifetime's work because, why would they not? It affected their revenue streams. And he actually died a broken man. Now, in 1934, the University of Southern California actually appointed a special medical research committee to bring 16 terminal cancer patients from Pasadena Hospital to Rife's San Diego laboratory for treatment. And this team included doctors and pathologists who were assigned to examine the patients if still alive in 90 days, and Rife successfully cured 14 out of the 16 terminally ill patients within 3 months, while the other 2 were cured after subsequent treatments. Okay, and this was called the Rife frequency generator. And if you happen to Google, or I prefer you not to use Google, some kind of internet search tool. If you happen to Google them, then you'll be inundated with mainstream medical apologists and websites allegedly debunking them. Why would that be? Well, I would have thought it's fairly obvious why. The mainstream medical profession is a highly lucrative business, especially the cancer industry, which is a multi-trillion-dollar business. Take away the disease cancer, and there goes huge amounts of money currently lining the pockets of those in charge of it. Okay, so that was Rife's microscope that he used, and I'm coming to explain to you a little bit more about how the whole thing worked. And there is Rife's frequency generator. That's his original one, actually. Now, this is a genuine newspaper headline from the 1930s. You can see it says that dread disease germs destroyed by rays, claims of SD scientists. So you get the picture there, I hope. What happened was his work actually identified the unique resonance frequency. In fact, sorry, I'll play another video and I'll let this explain it a little bit more. Oh, there we don't go.
Dr. Royal Raymond Rife, and why are so many people still interested in the technology he spent many years?
Oh dear, this is not good, is it? Yeah, I think we're going to have to abandon that, I'm sorry. It's a shame. But yeah, it's a similar story to the Tesla generator, except that they really went to town on poor old Mr. Rife. Of course, you know, as I said, Big Pharma did not approve of his invention, and had it been allowed to prevail, it would have deprived the pharma companies and the medical profession of billions in revenue. So they simply destroyed all his work. And they burnt down his laboratory. And, you know, he lived out the rest of his life in basically poverty because of it. But what he did was he discovered that all living tissues, including bacteria, viruses, etc., have a unique natural resonance. And his machine was attuned to these resonances because what he did, he spent years and years using his microscope, discovering which viruses, which bacteria responded to what resonance cycle. And when the machine was applied, it produced a frequency that actually shook those organisms to pieces. Okay, so it's a bit like when an opera singer hits a certain note and a glass shatters. It's that similar kind of principle. Yeah, so it literally destroyed these harmful bodies by vibration. And of course, again, as I keep mentioning, this was a huge threat to the pharma cartel. So they had to eradicate that threat. But you'll be pleased to know, if you're interested in it, they are freely available. Once again, somebody actually back-engineered them, because they did destroy the technology years and years ago, but someone back-engineered them, and now they are actually available on the internet commercially. They cost a few £100, but they do work. I'm going to skip forward a little bit here. Okay. So yeah, obviously it seriously threatened the cancer gravy train for such that it is in terms of revenues generated. So they began a huge cover-up operation, and a journalist who had been actually promoting Rife's work was followed and shot at. And unsurprisingly, he never wrote again in support of Rife or his work, and all reporting of Rife's work was censored by the American Medical Association. All his supporters and scientific allies were scorned and ridiculed by the mainstream medical mafia, and he basically, again, he died a broken man. He became an alcoholic, and he died a very sad and lonely death. So again, it's a similar story to the Tesla machine, except, as I say, they really went to town on poor Mr. Rife. So okay, we've probably all heard of free energy. There are lots and lots of free energy devices around, contrary to what you read in the mainstream. There are two elements to free energy. What does it actually mean? It's free in two senses. It's free as in it generates more energy out than it does energy in, which mainstream science tells us is impossible. Well, it's not. And it's also free as in it costs nothing. Okay, let's try another video. Let's see if we're lucky with this one. It's my presentation is falling about my ears at the moment, but go on.
Right now we have entrenched energy monopolies and cartels. You know, we have OPEC and we have the seven sister oil companies that control all the oil and energy. But what people have to understand is that the people who run the energy business in this world, which is the biggest business on the planet, turning over $4 to $5 trillion a year, it's bigger than guns and drugs, it's bigger than defense. They control the newspapers, they control the governments. But these companies do so big that they regulate the government, which regulates them. It's not free. Nothing is free. But cheap and efficient energy exchange is a viable concept. Now I say that everything in this universe is free energy. It's been dreamed of for hundreds of years that somewhere, someplace, as Tesla said, man will hook his machinery to the very wheel work which drives the universe itself. The history of science is the history of the suppression of great inventions. A few classic stories. Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla is regarded as the founding father of free energy. His astounding developments in the generation of alternating electrical current are still being used today. His most notorious project involved the transmission of wireless electricity into the atmosphere, which allowed for unlimited power to be freely accessed by everyone. When his financial backer, J.P. Morgan, realized that this power Tesla's career was destroyed. In 1977, Bruce de Palma unveiled the first prototype of the N machine, an electrical generator which uses rotating magnets to generate up to 5 times more power than it takes to drive it. I know about the fact that the Japanese government and the Indian government have ongoing projects to produce their machines for domestic power. My partner is Paramaham Satori, who is the director of the Nuclear Power Corporation of India, which operates all the nuclear plants in India.
In the late 70s, I learned from Bruce de Palma that he had carried out certain crucial experiments by rotating electromagnets.
Tewari tested the prototype based on de Palma's N machine under laboratory conditions. The results were deemed too impressive, causing disbelief and suspicion among conservative government officials and the power consortiums that backed the project. Tewari was forced to abandon the project completely.
We make a breakthrough that will no doubt make motorists happy. As Rob Robinson explained, the Pentagon is also showing lots of interest in this project.
U.S. inventor Stan Martin released his water-powered car engine in 1988. Mars found it virtually impossible to secure financial backing after certain Pentagon officials paid him. A number of similar inventions were developed and tested all around the world.
My best friend was killed over this matter. There's a chap here, about 10 minutes away from here, driving. He has been running his car on water since 1986 with the government's permission, provided that he keeps his mouth shut. And with regular intervals, using his own words, they keep warning him to keep his mouth shut. One of our colleagues who have been running car on water for the 10-year period now, he reckons that he's 26 times more powerful than petrol.
If you invent a better mousetrap, the world may be a path to your door. If you invent a free energy machine, there'll be a path to your door, but you don't want those people there.
One of the pivotal people that I encountered early in my career was Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut. Edgar J. Mitchell, an Apollo mission astronaut, founded the Noetics Institute in Southern California. The institute's job was supposedly to develop alternative energy systems by attracting inventors from all over the country. Mitchell became extremely interested in de Palma's N machine. He made de Palma a paltry offer to buy out the invention, which de Palma naturally refused. He said to me that if I ever tried anything on my own in California, I would get my head blown off. So I was scared to death. The CIA operates through various very innocent-looking fronts to find out what people are thinking and what they're inventing. Now, what's more innocent than the benign institute founded on transcendental principles to help new age inventors bring free energy into the world?
And situations still exist in the United States today where the person that really understands what's going on just can't get their idea out because the alternative science and medical fields have been co-opted by the intelligence services.
And he converted this little engine to run on water. This is many, many years ago. And he used it for several years. And somehow the news got out, and one day he got visitors, and he was told to dock the engine or else. 3 weeks later, the man was dead. The coroner's finding was that he fell off the back of a train. He was drunk. It happened that he didn't drink.
Even Dr. Townsend T. Brown, the electrogravitic research scientist, has on his 16mm film of his lab test, which we've got here, he has guys with the black suits and black hats come into the place. You can see where the legends come from. I mean, these guys come in and they look like, bad Bart, the black man. I mean, it's classic, and these things do happen. There is no progressive science in a world where every scientific idea is evaluated for its military potential.
So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the water-powered car in a little while. But here are some examples of technology that's been invented, beneficial to mankind, but yet has been suppressed. A lot of these things we're not going to talk about. This presentation I usually do, but go into more details, but because of the time constraints, we're just going to look at water-powered car in a moment. But all these other things, mechanical heater, for example, that's a heater that works purely by mechanics. There's no electric or any other power source involved. If you like, it's a clockwork heater. In effect, something called the implosion engine, cold fusion, all examples of free energy. Anti-gravity devices, I'm not sure about those. Some people don't believe in them. I'm kind of halfway house on that, I think. But some people claim that they do exist. But let's look in more detail at the water-powered car. Okay, and this is another, if you'll indulge me, this is another short video. This is specifically relating to a guy called Stan Myers in the States. Can we hear that?
Major breakthrough that will no doubt make motorists happy. As Ralph Robinson explains, the Pentagon is also showing lots of interest in this project.
Water has always been considered a precious commodity, but Stan Myers' invention may make it even more valuable. He has developed what's called a water fuel cell. It has taken the place of his old gas tank. The water fuel cell breaks down water molecules into oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen is used to run his dune buggy. I don't care if you use rainwater, well water, city water, ocean water. If you don't have any fresh water, go ahead and use snow. If you don't have any snow available to you, then use salt water because there's no adverse effect to the fuel cell. Myers started working on this project 4 years ago. He's not a scientist. He isn't even a chemist. In fact, he never graduated from college. Myers was determined, he says, to design something to protect this country from oil embargoes. We've calculated that if we take the dune buggy from Los Angeles to New York, we would roughly use 22 gallons of water. The Pentagon flew Lieutenant Colonel in last week to look at Myers' invention. There's talk of possibly using it in the Star Wars defense program and to run army tanks. Myers is currently perfecting a water fuel cell for cars. It will cost about $1,500. He says it won't need any maintenance, and you won't have to replace it. It'll be at least 2 years before the fuel system goes to mass production. The day it happens, we want the fuel industry hates. But if we're smaller diesel bills have to say at one time or another, fill her up. I'm Ralph Robinson. As you can see, many patents have already been received, and many more are forthcoming. Today, there are 42 patents that have been applied for.
Right, shortly after that film was made, Stan was murdered. I'll tell you the story about that in a moment. But I don't know if you picked up on that, but he said that it would run from New York to the West Coast, which is 3,000 miles, on 22 gallons of water. And it was capable of speeds over 100 miles an hour as well. Those patents still exist on the internet, they're still there. But since poor old Stan, nobody has ever dared to use them again. And again, when I come to the end of this presentation, I'll explain the geopolitical implications of free energy and how and why it is actually suppressed. So yeah, water-powered car. It's a process that's known as super efficient electrolysis, and it was invented by, as I said, Stanley Myers. And as I say, capable of 100 miles an hour plus, well over 100 miles, well over 100 miles on a single gallon of water, as we saw, and the patents still exist. And if you want to look that patent up, be my guest. It's there, it works. But Mayer was murdered in 1996, shortly after that film was made. What happened was, he was sat in his office one day, his brother was his partner, they were looking for funding to take it to market, commercialise it, and he got a phone call, and these two guys said, you know, let's meet up over dinner, we'll talk about it. So Stan and his brother went to dinner with these two guys, and they were sat at the table having a nice dinner and a nice chat about moving the project forward. And all of a sudden, Stan clutched his throat And he ran out in agony through the restaurant door, collapsed on the pavement and died within about 5 seconds. And he'd been poisoned, basically. These two guys that were with him, that had come to meet them, they casually walked out the restaurant door, stepped over Stan's dying body without looking back, and just disappeared off down the street. And of course his brother was totally distraught, but that was the end of poor old Stan and his water-powered car. And this is what they do. This is what they suppress any technology that is a threat. And what I mean by a threat, I'll come on to at the end. Okay, so that's just an implosion engine. Again, I won't show you that video for time constraints. It was invented by a guy by the name of Victor Schauberger in the 1930s, and it was a fuelless engine that produces energy from vacuums. And it also tapped into gravity, allegedly, and centrifugal force, allegedly, to create some kind of perpetual motion. And Schauberger himself, he was actually apprehended by US intelligence and illegally held in custody without charge for 9 months. Meanwhile, they confiscated all his work and destroyed his laboratory and all his research documents. Okay, again, vested interests. Okay, cold fusion, tabletop device, forcefully debunked by mainstream science, and it still is to this day, but it's been documented many, many times since then. And if it had been taken seriously and adopted, which it never will be, of course, unless things change, it's got many, many practical uses in industrial processes. Again, another video. I won't go into it because time constraints do not allow. So, again, why would they suppress inventions and discoveries? And how easy is it for the establishment to fool most of the people all of the time? Well, you probably don't need me to answer that one. I mean, it's very easy to prove that we're constantly being sold lies by the powers that shouldn't be, ranging from the small to the impossibly huge, such as things like the fake moon landings, 9/11, and other things, which again I won't go into at this point in time. So okay, let's wrap this bit of the presentation up. Okay, so who, again, repeat the question, whose purposes are most served by the suppression of technology? In other words, cui bono in Latin, that means who benefits, and what forces are facilitating the cover-ups. Okay, so we know that there's an absolute money monopoly now in place throughout the world, and this monopoly is in the hands of a tiny clique of people, and they just happen to be the world's wealthiest families. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? You know, these are the billionaires and trillionaires of this world that we don't get to hear about in the news. And their goal is to totally control the entire world and control all our lives through the availability or non-availability of resources. Right, so an independent source of wealth in the hands of individuals in the form of free energy would ruin their plans, basically. Economies can currently be controlled by the raising or lowering of interest rates, which is what they do. But if an independent source of wealth in the form of free energy was present, that stranglehold on the economy would be negated. And in effect, free energy technology would seriously impact the value of money and therefore the balance of power. And the elite, the people who really run the world, and I don't mean governments by that, governments are just puppets, they don't want any competition. These people control all the corporations and everything else, the money supply and everything. Sorry, I've lost the place here. Yeah, so free energy is not just something to suppress, it's got to be permanently suppressed and eradicated at all, wherever possible. So, oh, sorry, I'm going backwards here. Beg your pardon. There we go. So, how do they keep these things suppressed? Well, they use intimidation, as we've seen, and even the murder of inventors. They use character assassination, they use arson, they burn down their laboratories, they destroy their technology, and they use expert debunkers. What do I mean by that term? People in the media who are trained to come up with reasons why these inventions aren't bad for us all, rather than the opposite. They also perform things like buying up of technology and shelving it, and they also destroy it, and they promote very heavily the incorrect scientific principle that free energy is impossible, according to Newton's laws of thermodynamics, which, by real science, have been disproved. But yet, we still hear about them. Now, it's also suppressed by governments as well as corporations. Free energy is, in fact, a government's worst nightmare because it would lead to an inevitable reordering of the balance of power and could lead to war in attempts to prevent others from gaining competitive advantages. Everyone would covet that technology and yet wish to prevent everyone else from getting it, owning it, using it. And it's also suppressed for another reason, and that is to maintain revenue streams. In other words, for vested interests. They don't like having their revenue streams curtailed or challenged in any way. And the governments also prevent patents from being granted on grounds of national security or indeed any other jumped up reason they can think of. And it leads to the illegal harassment of inventors, criminal charges against them, trumped up criminal charges, severe tax audits, phone taps, and, as I mentioned before, quite often arson and theft of their inventions, of course. So again, we're coming to this end of this half of the presentation. So in a nutshell, free energy for everyone would actually be the manifestation of unlimited abundance. And what I mean by that is, it might sound like I'm advocating communism, but far from it. I mean, the evils of communism, to me, are an absolute anathema, but there you go. All I advocate is a fair and just society where individual people matter, not just the so-called greater or common good. And whenever you hear that particular epithet, you can be sure that that is a synonym for communism. But society shouldn't be controlled via the wealth of huge multinational corporations and conglomerates, which is the current status quo. So yeah, we'll be looking at a much more equal world for everyone, and that we can't have that. And it would be the engine of the economy of a more enlightened society. A society where everyone's individual needs are fulfilled, maybe, and in which no one can become rich or rule the world with it. And of course, again, that cannot be allowed. So here's a quote from my book, The Falsification of History. The world as it's currently ordered cannot have free energy technology without being totally transformed by it into something else. Unfortunately, those who control us have shown that they cannot be trusted with energy resources. They will only do what they've always done, which is to take merciless advantage of each other and kill each other, themselves and us, in their endless quest for profits. Right, so that's a bit about suppressed technology. Now let's look at some real technology, which we're probably all familiar with. So, right, who thinks electric cars are green? Oh, come on, somebody must. I might as well pack up now then. Okay, let's look at it anyway. Right. So, yeah. Are they really greener than internal combustion engines? Let's see. Anyone know how much, well, it actually says it there, doesn't it? How much an average electric vehicle battery weighs? I'm talking about cars here. An electric SUV weighs approximately 35% more than its petrol equivalent. Okay, so what you say. But does anybody know how much an EV battery weighs, roughly, on average? Right. It weighs well over half a ton, and in some examples, it's more than a ton, depending on the model of car. Okay. So extra weight means greater braking distances and also increased road maintenance costs. Can you imagine the problems once these batteries start to wear out? And they will, sooner or later. Maybe not this year or next year, but sometime in the next decade, this is going to become a huge problem. These huge batteries, they are probably going to get dumped in landfill eventually. How green is that? You know, but they can't be dismantled like a car engine can be and used for spares, you know, recycled. So it is a big problem. Okay. Electric car production, surprisingly enough, creates approximately 70% more emissions than petrol cars. This is not me making this stuff up. This is stuff that I found out by looking into it. And, you know, they actually need to be used for many tens of thousands of miles on the road before the higher carbon footprint is offset. Okay, and here's an example. The VW e-Golf needs 77,000 miles before it recoups the higher carbon footprint generated over and above its petrol diesel equivalent. And these are the manufacturer's own figures, not mine. Again, it's easy to check this stuff. And also, believe it or not, there is a distinct lack of saleability of electric vehicles, second-hand ones. And this actually means that it might never happen. They may never reach that break-even figure in terms of carbon footprint. There are actually thousands upon thousands of unwanted second-hand EVs currently gathering dust on garage forecourts. And fatality probability increases. Again, these are not my figures. These are manufacturers' figures. Increases by 47% for every extra 1,000 pounds of weight. But sadly, there is currently no political or economic appetite for research into reduction of battery size. Now, in March 2023, so a few months ago, a New York multi-storey car park collapsed and there were fatalities. It collapsed because of the predominance of electric vehicles and the increased weight involved. Now, there's obviously, as electric vehicles proliferate, which they are doing, this is going to become a common occurrence. Either car parks, multi-stories have to be pulled down and rebuilt, which is obviously very costly, not very good for the environment, all the rest of it, or they have to be strengthened. Whichever way, it's a very, very costly and non-green activity. Yeah, so, you know, think of the future potential for multiple fatalities when electric cars consist of 70 or even 90% of vehicles on the road. And they can take up to an hour to recharge, even on rapid charge. They're severely limited by battery range. I think we all know this anyway. And they're almost silent as well. No one gives this any kind of serious credence because it's dangerous for children and the hard of hearing. I mean, I've almost stepped out into the road, not heard the car coming, you know, because I think we grew up with that hum of a car engine and we kind of tune into that sound when we're attempting to cross the road. And it's so easy to miss that because they're almost silent and it's very, very dangerous, especially for children and the hard of hearing, as I say. And EVs actually emit tons upon tons of harmful gases in the manufacturing process. They also use unsustainable materials and extraction methods. And guess what? Their energy source is the national grid, and that depends on what? Fossil fuels to generate the electricity. Think about that. Or biomass, coal, oil, etc. So they're absolutely no greener at all than conventional cars, and in many ways are far less green and safe. So another important factor, and you may have seen some of this in the news, although it doesn't get a lot of coverage, but it's much more common than you imagine. Lithium-ion batteries, the fires that these generate, are virtually impossible to extinguish. Unbelievable perhaps, but it's absolutely true. And again, it's not very well publicised. For example, the fire may appear to be out, but then it can spontaneously erupt again, hours, days, or even weeks later. There were 164 electric vehicle fires in London alone this year already. These are the... Sorry?
Luton Airport car park.
Exactly that, yeah. I've not put it in the presentation, but you're absolutely right. Luton Airport.
In Italy, a few days ago, near Venice, Mestre,
Yeah.
there was an explosion. Yeah.
Lots and lots of examples. Yeah, absolutely. And what's more, lithium-ion battery fires produce a deadly toxic vapor cloud which is fatal if inhaled. Now, here, last week, it took firefighters in Canada over 4 hours and 16,000 litres of water to extinguish this Tesla battery fire and stop it reigniting, which is the important thing. Eventually, they had to manually dig a car-sized hole, fill it full of water, and drag the blazing car into it. And this is not something that happens infrequently. This is becoming a more and more frequent occurrence. You know, I believe that in Germany alone this year, 3 bus depots have burnt down that were filled with electric buses. It's just becoming more and more predominant. We are hearing about it in the news, but they're still trying to suppress it. Okay, I've got some interesting quotes here. Yeah. Powerful I don't know if you could read that, but I'll read it anyway. Powerful explosion rocked Tashkent on Thursday, 28th September, causing a large fire, the death of a boy and leaving hundreds injured. According to the Reuters news agency, the explosion took place in a customs warehouse storing batteries for electric vehicles. The explosion was so powerful that almost nothing was left of the warehouse. The shock wave from the explosion, which was felt at a distance of 30 kilometres, early in the morning broke dozens of windows, which resulted in the killing of a teenager from broken windows and injuring at least 162 people, 24 of whom very seriously. Full or empty, the risk of this energy escaping in an uncontrolled fashion is what some scientists believe leads to thermal runaway, when heat and gases fuel even higher temperatures and still more gases, including hydrogen and oxygen, in a self-fulfilling loop until the cells begin to burn and burst. A toxic vapor cloud develops, bringing with it the risk of deflagration. And just to continue that, once thermal runaway has started, no battery management system or circuit breaker can stop it. A battery fire can be controlled, but it cannot be extinguished. In Germany, 3 bus depots have gone up in flames in the past 6 or so months. Tunnels, ferries, car parks, cargo ships transporting EVs have all experienced serious fires. In fact, 3 ships have sunk. All the places you find electric vehicles should be considered a safety risk and the appropriate steps taken. And that's a quote from Professor Paul Christensen, who was a senior advisor to the National Fire Chiefs Council in the UK. Okay. Now another quote, this is from Autocar magazine from last year. It says, experts are divided on how best to tackle an EV fire, but generally immense quantities of water to cool the battery pack, although this won't prevent fire erupting again, a fire blanket to suppress the flames, and breathing equipment for the firefighters to protect them from the toxic vapor cloud is the standard approach. Either that or simply let the blaze burn itself out. attempting to suffocate the fire with inert gases is ineffective because, being a chemical blaze, it does not require oxygen. Meanwhile, the surrounding area must be checked for discarded battery cells that could have been propelled from the battery pack by an explosion and might spontaneously ignite later. Following containment, the burnt-out EV must be removed and deposited in a compound away from buildings and other vehicles. Some 25% of scrapyard fires are caused by spent lithium-ion batteries. More radical steps include immersing the car in water, although not seawater, because chlorine gas can be released. Now, there is much, much more I could say about all this, but unfortunately time doesn't allow. So, in summary, are electric cars really green? I'll let you decide. And that, as I say, is that. Thank you. I'm sorry I had to skip through that really quickly, but as I say, time did not allow for a proper full examination of that. But there we go. It was just a brief snapshot to whet your appetite, should I say, not to wipe your attitude. Yeah. So. Yeah. Any questions for John? Yes, sir.
One question I've got. Thank you. Yeah. Can you tell us where we can find that quote from the fire officer? Because it could be useful to repeat that. Yeah.
I can't remember off the top of my head where I got it from, but if you get the guy's name again, let's go backwards and find him. Paul Christensen, and his job title, Senior Advisor to the National Fire Chiefs Council. I'm sure if you key that into the internet, you would find that.
Because I was wondering if we're dealing with local councils and parish councils that want to promote electric cars.
Yeah.
Quote something like that.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Okay, any more questions? Comments?
Oh, I thoroughly recommend John's books. They're completely gripping. And the research he does is extraordinary. I read the Titanic one, which is the sinking of the Olympics. I read it very quickly for me because I read very slowly, and the every detail was extraordinary.
Thank you.
So very well worth buying.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'm humbled. Any more questions? No.
Right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.